In this video we're going to be listening to some Pickwick albums and seeing how the sound stacks up against the Camden releases. Just a quick primer to begin with then. The Camden albums were a series of budget releases beginning in 1969 with Flaming Star and going right up until the end of 72 with the Separate Ways album. They usually had 10, sometimes even as few as 9 songs. The first ones were excellent value for money because they contained music you couldn't get anywhere else. The middle ones were also pretty good because they contained hard to obtain songs, and the last few were pretty much cash-in jobs. Then, at the end of 1975, all 10 releases were reissued on the Pickwick label, and as well as the 10 what we call the Camden titles, they also released a couple of new ones as well. One of which was this compilation, Double Dynamite. This is essentially a sampler, if you like, in that it contains tracks from 9 of the 10 original Camden budget albums. The only album not represented on here is the Christmas album. And what you got here is the 2 album sets stuffed into a single pocket sleeve. I got this one new a few years ago, opened it up, and you guessed it, the records were warped. Anyway, that's a really nice back cover. I think that would have made a better front cover than this one here. Pickwick had a habit of using old RCA pictures for the front covers. As you can see in their next release here, Frankie and Johnny, this came out in 1976, I believe, although it says 75 on the cover. And it's an abridged version of the original 12-track soundtrack from 1966. I believe the reason why there are fewer songs on these albums, like I said, 9 or 10 songs as a rule, was so that they didn't have to spend as much on royalties. And it's always a worry when you get an album like this where they've, taken away some songs. Are they going to take away the good ones? Well, I'm happy to say that on this particular album, they did leave in everybody's favorite, Petunia, the Gardener's Daughter, so you can relax. Just out of interest, the songs that they did away with were Chessay, Look Out Broadway, and Everybody Come Aboard. This album was actually released at a bad time for RCA, or it turned out to be bad timing, because the following year Elvis died, of course, and there was a huge demand for all his back catalogue. And so RCA re-released a lot of the soundtracks that had become unavailable, but they didn't bother releasing the original Frankie and Johnny album, presumably because this 9-track version was still available. And then there's one more album that came out on the Pickwick label, and that was Mahalo from Elvis in 1978. Surely a candidate for the worst Elvis album cover of all time. Look at that photograph. It's out of focus, his eyes are half shut, he looks drugged, his hair is stuck to his face from sweat. I guess this picture was taken maybe about 72, judging by the jumpsuit. If I'm wrong, let me know. There must have been a lot of much better shots than that available. That is a really poor cover. At least they made some effort with the color scheme, using the pink letters to go with the pink lighting on his jumpsuit here. Now this was actually a semi-essential album back in 1978 because all the songs on side 1 were the 5 songs that Elvis had recorded in 1973 immediately after the Aloha from Hawaii live concert. The other side, side 2, is a pretty meaningless collection of movie songs. And like I said, this was 1978, so all the songs on side B were available on RCA soundtrack albums, so I'm not sure what was really going on there. So that is the background. So let me show you what we're going to be listening to and the songs we're going to be playing. So first of all, I've got a Camden copy of Flaming Star. As I say, this was the first budget album from 69. I'm not including the RCA Victor version from 68. And we're going to be listening to a little bit of the song Night Life. I'll just show you the labels here very quickly, just for the first couple, because otherwise all the same. It's the turquoise Camden label, and this has got the deep groove, so I think this might have been one of the early pressings. And that one will be competing against the Pickwick copy. Now, say what you like about Pickwick or against Pickwick. I know some people don't actually like Pickwicks. But look at that. Is that not the most inclusive record logo you could ever wish to see? Rainbow coloured letter P. P for pride. Now that is what I call diversity, equity and inclusion. So we're going to be listening to, like I said, Nightlife on that album. The next pair of albums we've got is Let's Be Friends. I don't have an American Camden copy, so we're going to be listening to this UK RCA International copy. These were also sold at cheap prices in the UK. The Camdens came later. This one's actually quite an unusual cover in that the backside is also laminated. It's quite difficult to find this cover laminated on both sides. And it's on the green RCA International label. This will be going against the Pickwick copy of Let's Be Friends, and I did notice actually that the quality of the printing on the back cover, the photograph, the image, is far better on the Pickwick than on the RCA International. You can see his face very clearly there on the Pickwick, but on the RCA International it's mostly dark shadow. We will be listening to a little bit of I'll Be There from that album. Then we'll be moving on to Almost in Love. Again, I've only got a UK RCA International copy. And we'll be listening also to a little bit of the Pickwick copy of Almost in Love. I tend to prefer the Camden covers to the Pickwick covers because the Camden covers tended not to have all this flowery nonsense. But in the case of Almost in Love, I don't really like the original cover because the blue jumpsuit doesn't really go with this mustard coloured background. So I can see what they've done here with this flowery business on the outside. It maybe is a slight improvement, but like so many Camden and Pickwick covers, it does look pretty cheap. So we're going to be listening to a little bit of Edge of Reality from those two albums. Next we have You'll Never Walk Alone. This is the Camden copy. Here is the Pickwick copy. And I've got an extra copy that I'm going to throw into the mix here. This is actually a Japanese copy. This one is on the RCA label. So the first few so-called Camden albums were on the RCA label in Japan. So let's see if that one actually sounds any better. We're going to be listening to a little bit of the excellent song We Call on Him. Bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Underrated gem is that one. And then finally we're going to be taking a listen to a couple of songs from I Got Lucky. This is the RCA Camden version. And then we've also got the Pickwick version here. I did notice that in this particular case the RCA cover is a little bit sharper than the Pickwick cover. And I'm less keen on all this flowery business here. The back covers are the same. And we're going to be taking to one of my favorites on this album, Bit of the Love Machine. Now I'm not going to tell you which sample is which, so you'll hear either the Pickwick or the non-Pickwick first. And in the case of You'll Never Walk Alone, you'll hear 3 different samples. So I'm going to mix them up. Sometimes the Pickwicks will be first, sometimes they won't be first. So think about which ones you like the best, and then at the end I'll tell you which was which. Talk to you soon.
Oh, the neons are a-gleaming and the gamblers are a-dreaming. Oh, it's nightlife, yeah, nightlife. Oh, the neons are a-gleaming and the gamblers are a-dreaming. Oh, it's nightlife, yeah, nightlife. I'll be there when all your dreams are broken. I'll be there when all your dreams are broken. On the edge of reality she sits there tormenting me, the girl with the nameless name. On the edge of reality she sits there tormenting me, the girl with the nameless name. that only when we're lonely. Why must it be that only when we're lonely? We're just a bunch of salty sailors, one thing on our mind, taking a chance on this machine, maybe love. We're just a bunch of salty sailors, one thing on our mind, taking a chance on this machine, maybe love.
All right, so how much difference could you hear in those samples? Well, let me tell you which was which. So the first one we listened to, Nightlife. The first sample was the Camden, and the second one was the Pickwick. Then I'll Be There, the first sample was the RCA International, and the second one was the Pickwick again. Almost in Love, we listened to Edge of Reality. The first one was Pickwick, the second one was RCA International. Then we listened to We Call on Him. The first one was Pickwick, the second was Camden, and the third was the Japanese RCA pressing. And finally, The Love Machine. The first one was Camden, and the second one was the Pickwick. So could you tell the difference? And did either Pickwick or non-Pickwick come out on top? Any other thoughts? Let me know in the comment section below. But that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Take care. Cheers.